What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to my subscribers, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Ken. So today I want to talk to you guys about how I grew my deer herd to a larger number on my Northwest Wisconsin property. So for those of you that don't know, the herd density in the northern part of Wisconsin is nothing like it is in the southern and central part of the state. And that's just because there's not a ton of ag up there. The natural cover is a lot of like big open hardwoods and stuff like that. That's just not ideal habitat for deer. So when you want to increase the size of your deer herd, there's two things you need to look at. I'm going to talk about those in this video, and I'm going to talk about three subsegments of each of those. So you're going to get 6 tips from this video. So first of all, you want to look at what your habitat doesn't have. So in that situation, what I don't have is food naturally. All they really have is like maybe acorns, which last them for a very short part of the season. There's some native vegetation they can browse on during the warmer months. But when you get into the winter, they don't have that much to browse on because those high canopies of big trees really choke out all that undergrowth that they depend on to make it through the winter. So what I needed to focus on up there first was food. So the very first thing I did up there for habitat improvement was put in food plots. Now, putting in food plots in the big woods is very challenging because you have to open up that canopy. Now, I've done videos on this. If you guys want to know how to put food plots in the big woods, go check them out. They are on my channel for you guys. I'll also include them at the end of this video. But once we got those food plots established, we were able to give the deer a lot more food than they had naturally. So what you're looking at doing here is like your natural habitat before you touch it can support, say, this many deer. But as you continually improve it, you grow that habitat to support this many deer. And when you do that, you have more options for what you want to harvest on your property, regardless of what that is. So you're going to see more deer, and you're going to have opportunities at more deer and at older deer, bigger deer, etc. So the more habitat improvements you do, the more deer your property holds, the more deer you have. So I did that, like I said, through doing food plots. Second thing I needed to do to add food on that property though was to get some browse down at their level. So what I had to do there was take out some canopy. So I already had to take out some canopy to get those food plots in. And so what happens then is you get that sunlight down to those food plots, but you open that canopy a little bit more, and you're going to start to see the native vegetation around your food plots where you're not controlling it start to spring up too, and sort of create that edging for your food plot, but it's also going to create that browse and that cover for your deer herd as well. Now, you can do this on other parts of your property too. Open up that canopy, get some sunlight down there, get that regenerative growth. We have a ton of poplar trees on that property, so something that's super easy to do is just cut down poplar trees. You ignite their root system on fire when you do that, and all of those roots shoot up new growth of nice tender browse for your herd. And so when you do that, you're just getting more stems closer to the ground, and the deer absolutely love that. They have way more food that way year round, and it will hold a much larger deer herd on your property. So now I want to get into the third and last thing about creating food. And so what we had to do there was we had to go through the woods, and when we were trying to open up canopy, we wanted to select cut around certain trees. So we would find like a nice big oak tree that was producing a ton of acorns for us, and we would cut down the other trees around that oak tree in order to allow it to grow bigger and lusher and drop even more acorns. So we wanted to remove the competition from the good species of tree, and in this case it was our oak trees for acorns, in order to allow them to flourish and drop even more acorns in the woods for us. Now, this doesn't make it super easy to hunt in regards to this because those oak trees are just randomly throughout the property. But what it does do is helps you to hold that bigger deer herd and raise a larger deer herd. And that's what we're trying to do in this video, is just get more deer on your property. You guys can go watch the strategies in my other videos of how we actually get those deer in front of us to get a shot on them. This video is just about getting as many deer on our property as possible. So before we get into the second thing of how we really focus on getting more deer on our property, I want to highlight some gear that I absolutely love using, and that is Under Armour's Cold Gear Infrared Base Layer. I bought this stuff years ago, and I get so much use out of it. If you guys are ever cold in the stand, Go check this out. I have not been cold since I got this. I just figured I'd share that with you guys because I know I wish somebody had told me that a long, long time ago. And I'll leave a link to it down in the description if you want to go check that out. So the second thing we want to focus on when we're trying to get a larger deer herd on our property is cover, and I'll go over 3 ways of how we do that. Now, on this property specifically, I had way more cover naturally than I had food, so I obviously started with the food, but we've also begun to work on the cover as well. So when we're talking about cover, we want to once again open up that canopy. That's one of the big problems you have when you have that big wood setting, that big wood scenario, is that you have all of that high canopy just choking out everything that's down at the layer that the deer are actually living on. And so you need to open up as much of that canopy as possible to get as much of that growth happening down beneath you as possible. And so what I did originally, like I said, I opened it up near those food plots. And so when it was open near the food plots, we started to get natural cover growing up next to the food plot. So we also wanted to get other pockets throughout the property for like bedding areas and such. So again, we go through and we just open up some canopy. We just get as much sunlight down to the forest floor as we can get, and that will just regenerate that forest floor to let everything that's down there being choked out just spring up and put a whole bunch of stems right at the deer level. And once you have that, you're going to have cover for both bedding, but you're also going to cut down on those sight lines, and you're going to pack a lot more deer on your property because deer don't like to be able to see each other. They put pressure on each other, social pressure. So the more you can cut down on those sight lines by having more stuff between point A and point B, and in this case it's sticks and twigs and whatever else, the more deer you're going to put on your property. Plus that is all going to be browse for them too, so it's additional food in the area for them as well, because they of course need browse in their bedding areas. Now the second thing we did to get more cover was we transplanted some of the conifers that were already existing on the property, but we put them where we wanted them. Now conifers themselves are not a great habitat tree. Deer aren't necessarily going to like bed near them or use them because they aren't a browse for them. Deer always want that browse with whatever they're bedding near. But what conifers are great at doing is cutting down those sight lines. So any of you guys that have watched enough of my videos know I talk about cutting down on those sight lines all the time. You don't want to be able to see more than 100 yards in any direction on your property. And so if you have a big sight line that needs to be cut down on, conifers are the way to go. And especially if you want them to be somewhere where you don't necessarily want the deer to be. So this would be on like those hunter ingress trails, or just at your stand locations themselves where you want a little bit of cover to hide you when you're at your stand location, but you don't want the deer necessarily at that specific spot. Conifers are awesome for that. They're also great at just putting up screening for like roads so people can't look onto your property from the road. Maybe you have a big hill or something you need cover that the lower growth isn't really going to cover, so you need to use those conifers that are going to grow a lot taller. You're definitely going to want something that grows fast like pines for those locations, but we definitely take advantage of doing that, of just digging up some conifers, mostly pines on this property, although there are a few spruce as well, and just go plant those at the bottom of our stand locations, just areas we don't want the deer to be able to see us as we're like coming into the stands or whatever. Definitely take advantage of those as well for creating more cover, cutting down on those sight lines on your property. And the third thing we did to help our cover on the property isn't something we necessarily did, but we took advantage of the topography that's on the property. So I planted food plots that would be screened and hidden by the natural topography around them. I have my small little honey hole food plot that's my favorite food plot on this property. I call the crater food plot because it is literally like a crescent of topography, as if a meteor had crashed down and created this three-sided crater, and the food plot sits right in the bottom of that. So it works well for me a few ways because erosion carries the best soil down to the bottom into the food plot for me, but also it's completely screened on 3 sides just naturally by the topography there. So by kind of checking out your topography, using those natural funnels, those natural hills and valleys, and the way that it cuts down naturally on your sightlines is a great way to add cover to your property or to create cover between attractions you're creating on your property. So you definitely want to keep that in mind when you're placing attractions on your property, when you're placing stand locations, when you're thinking about how you're going to get into these stands. Use topography to your advantage whenever you can. So all right, if you guys feel like you got some value out of this video, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you guys enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one too, so go see if they're right.